It's July of 1900. A luxury yacht glides across Lake Erie, carrying members of one of Cleveland's wealthiest families. The weather seems manageable, the vessel seems trustworthy, and the afternoon seems quite ordinary. But then the sky changes, and within minutes, a celebrated yacht is upside down in the water. 6 people are dead. Only one survives. Grief sweeps through an entire city. But as investigators begin to ask questions, another story slowly emerges. It's a story of warnings and repairs, hidden concerns, and a vessel whose past may have been far more troubled than anyone realized. Was this simply a tragic accident caused by a sudden storm? Or was the disaster already waiting long before the first cloud ever appeared on the horizon that day? Join me today as I explore one of the strangest and most forgotten maritime tragedies on the Great Lakes, the sinking of the yacht Idler. Their story begins on a summer afternoon that looked entirely ordinary. That's how often the most enduring mysteries begin. No thunder announced itself hours in advance. It rarely ever does. No dramatic warnings echoed across the shoreline. No one standing on the docks of Lake Erie on July 7th of 1900. Nobody could point to the horizon and confidently predict that before the day was over, 6 members of one of Cleveland's most prominent families would be dead and a famous yacht would be resting beneath the water. The vessel was called the Idler. It was a name that suggested leisure and comfort and escape. The sort of name one gives to a yacht when life is going well and there's enough money available to spend an entire afternoon simply sailing because one can. Yet history occasionally enjoys a cruel sense of irony, and the Idler would become remembered not for comfort, but for catastrophe. To understand why the sinking captured so much attention, we have to understand who was aboard. The Corrigan family was not anonymous. James C. Corrigan was one of Cleveland's leading industrial figures. His success in iron and steel had helped to build an absolute fortune. The family occupied a place in society that newspapers took note of. When wealthy families attended events and purchased homes and traveled abroad or hosted gatherings, reporters often followed them. Their lives unfolded in public view, and that visibility would make the tragedy impossible to ignore. The yacht itself carried a remarkable history. Long before this disastrous day, the Idler had earned the reputation as one of the finest yachts on American waters. She had competed against elite vessels. She had belonged to wealthy owners. She'd been admired, discussed, and photographed. She'd even been painted a few times. In the credits today, you will see a couple of those paintings, and they are lovely. For years, this vessel represented a certain vision of American prosperity. But old vessels often carry with them some rather old secrets, too. Ships age, wood weakens, metal will corrode. Repairs are made, but repairs are delayed, too, and repairs are promised and sometimes forgotten. And the public usually notices the polished decks and the fresh paint on these things. And the public rarely sees what lies beneath the painted surface, especially these days with Instagram. On that July afternoon, nobody aboard appeared concerned about any kind of hidden flaws. Why would they be? The yacht had recently undergone extensive work, and money had been spent on it. They had given it to somebody they trusted. Improvements had been made, and confidence had been restored. And the family boarded their yacht. The crew prepared for departure. The shoreline slowly drifted away, and Lake Erie stretched out before them. Now, Lake Erie possesses a reputation that sometimes surprises people who are unfamiliar with the Great Lakes. It can appear calm and welcoming, but then with remarkable speed, it can become very dangerous. Its relatively shallow depth allows storms to build pretty quickly, and yes, there is a correlation. And conditions can change far faster than many travelers can expect. Experienced sailors understood this at the time, but even so, experience does not always prevent disasters from happening. As the yacht moved farther from shore, weather conditions began shifting. At first, the changes may have seemed rather insignificant. A stronger wind, a darker cloud, slightly rougher water. Nothing that necessarily caused alarm. But then the storm arrived. Accounts vary on specific details, but everyone agreed on the essential fact. The weather deteriorated rapidly. The lake became violent, and the yacht struggled. And suddenly, the situation was no longer just a routine sailing day. Imagine the confusion of these moments. One minute, there are these people who are engaged in conversation and tending to their infant child. And the next, they're trying to understand whether the vessel beneath them is even behaving normally. Then comes the realization that something is very, very wrong. The idler heeled sharply, and water entered the ship. Passengers began losing their footing. The carefully ordered world of a pleasure cruise absolutely dissolved into chaos. No one had boarded that yacht expecting to spend the afternoon fighting for their own survival. But survival suddenly became the only thing that mattered to any of them. The vessel capsized. The water claimed its victims very quickly. When rescue efforts began, there was still hope. Hope is stubborn that way. It survives even when evidence is bleak. Family will hope, and friends will hope, and communities will hope. But reality eventually arrives. And by the end of the tragedy, 6 of the 7 members of the Corrigan family on board the vessel that day were dead. Only one family member survived. The scale of the loss absolutely stunned Cleveland. Newspapers filled with the details, and questions multiplied. And grief settled over the entire city. Everybody knew who this family was. In every era, certain tragedies feel larger than just statistics, especially when it's a family who lives their life in the public eye like this. Whether these people knew everybody or not, everybody knew them, and they felt a personal connection to them. And this was one of those really, truly tragic events where everybody felt connected. The deaths were not anonymous names in a distant report. These were people with families and homes and ambitions and plans and futures. People who had left shore expecting to return by evening so that they could all have dinner together. But they never did. For many residents of Cleveland, the disaster felt personal, even if they had never met these victims. There's something particularly unsettling about a catastrophe that unfolds during an ordinary family outing, too. It reminds everyone how fragile an ordinary day can be. You don't have to be a millionaire to be susceptible to disaster. A war can feel distant. A family excursion is very familiar. And familiarity makes loss a lot harder to ignore. Investigators naturally began examining the circumstances of the event. The storm had certainly played a role, sure. That much was very obvious. But was the weather alone enough to explain everything? The question lingered. Then investigators and journalists began looking more closely at this yacht's past. What they found added another layer to the story. Years before this sinking, concerns had reportedly been raised about the vessel's condition. Various problems had been documented over time. There were structural issues and maintenance concerns and signs of deterioration. Warnings that, taken individually, might seem manageable, but when collectively put together, they painted a much more troubling picture. The public had not paid much attention to those details before this sinking. After all, every detail suddenly mattered now. But why would it matter before this? A vessel that had once appeared glamorous now just seemed complicated. And complicated stories rarely stay simple for long. And that's where our mystery truly begins. Because once people learned about the yacht's history, they started asking a question that still echoes more than a century later. Did the storm sink the idler? Or did the idler sink because the storm revealed weaknesses that had already been there all along? That question would prove remarkably difficult to answer, and it would give birth to theories and suspicions and debates. Now, it survived long after the wreck itself disappeared beneath the surface of Lake Erie. The deeper investigators looked, the less satisfying the answers became. Storms are convenient explanations because storms are real and palpable, and they're easy to see. They're easy to feel. Nobody disputes that they exist. Nobody needs a conspiracy to explain dark clouds and high winds and rough waters. But yet, disasters often create uncontrollable tensions between what is known and what is suspected. The official explanation may be technically correct while still feeling emotionally incomplete. That appeared to be the situation surrounding the idler. The storm had certainly been there, yes. The storm had been dangerous, but reports about the yacht's previous condition continued to circulate. Stories emerged regarding earlier concerns about structural weaknesses and maintenance problems. To grieving families, such revelations can feel like discovering a second tragedy hidden inside the first one. Hindsight is 20/20. It's one thing to lose loved ones to nature. It's another to wonder whether warning signs had existed long before anybody ever stepped aboard, and they just didn't do anything about it. That uncertainty helped to fuel speculation. Human beings are remarkably uncomfortable with randomness. We prefer causes and explanations and narratives that connect events to patterns. When 6 members of a wealthy family die during what should have been a pleasant excursion, many people instinctively began searching for deeper reasons and conspiracy theories. Some wondered whether repairs had truly been sufficient. Others questioned whether financial pressures and influenced decisions regarding the vessel. A few suspected outright cover-ups, but none of these theories ever produced any kind of convincing evidence. Nevertheless, once such ideas enter the public mind and the conversation, they tend to linger and kind of take on a life of their own. Facts may settle an investigation. They do not always settle public imagination. In fact, rarely do they ever. What makes this story particularly fascinating is how little malice is actually required to create a disaster. Modern audiences might search for villains because stories feel cleaner when someone can be squarely blamed for a disaster like this. But history frequently refuses to cooperate with this kind of a narrative. Sometimes catastrophe emerges from a chain of ordinary decisions. A repair was maybe postponed, a warning was underestimated, a weather forecast was dismissed, a routine voyage undertaken with confidence. No individual choice appears catastrophic on its own. Only afterward, when viewed together, does the sequence seem ominous. Looking backward creates the illusion that disaster was obvious to us. But looking forward rarely provides any kind of clarity of the same nature. There's another reason the sinking of the idler still resonates too. The victims occupied a position in their society that ensured their deaths would be remembered. It's like if the Kardashians all went down on a yacht. Newspapers covered every development, and readers, of course, followed every detail. Yet beneath the headline was a very human story. Families waited for news, and relatives hoped for some kind of a miracle. Do you see this baby in this photo here? This little infant. The infant went down too. Relatives hoped that this baby might have survived. Friends struggled to accept what had happened to these people. Wealth could purchase a magnificent yacht, and it could fund extensive renovations and attract public attention. But wealth could not negotiate with a storm. And the lake treated privilege and obscurity exactly the same way. A lake will always treat privilege and obscurity exactly the same. The Great Lakes have produced countless maritime tragedies. Some involved massive freighters. Some involved passenger steamers. Some involved fishing boats that vanished without any kind of explanation and without a trace. Yet smaller disasters often carry different emotional weight because they feel familiar. Most people can't imagine commanding a giant commercial vessel. Many can imagine joining friends or family on a small recreational outing. The idler was not engaged in a daring expedition. It wasn't exploring. It was not testing new technology. It was just carrying people across the water on a summer day for maybe a picnic. That familiarity makes the outcome feel closer, even after more than a century. After years passed, the wreck gradually faded from national attention. New disasters replaced the old ones. New headlines crowded out earlier tragedies, but yet local memory persisted. Historians continued researching. Maritime enthusiasts continued debating. Family descendants continued remembering the family that they lost. The sinking became part of a broader story of Lake Erie itself, a lake whose surface can appear peaceful while concealing extraordinary histories just beneath the surface. In that sense, the Idler joined a long list of vessels that became part of the region's underwater archive. The difference is that many shipwrecks are remembered because of what they carried. The Idler is remembered because of whom it carried. One detail remains especially striking. Before the sinking, the yacht's name suggested ease and leisure. After the sinking, the name acquired an entirely different tone. The transformation was not the result of mythology or exaggeration. It was the result of this tragic loss. History has a way of altering the meaning of ordinary words. Certain names became inseparable from the events attached to them. The Idler became one of those names. Mention it today among maritime historians, and the conversation quickly turns not to luxury or racing trophies, but to a storm, a capsize, and 6 lives tragically cut short. When we examine tragedies like this, we're often tempted to focus exclusively on the mystery of it all. Mysteries are compelling. They invite investigation, they encourage debate, and they create a sense of suspense. But yet the most important part of the story is not the unanswered question. It's the human cost. 6 people left the shore expecting to return home that day. There were 7 people who left, and only 1 returned. Their families expected the same thing. They expected them to come back, and instead a routine outing became a permanent absence. That reality deserves more attention than any conspiracy theory ever could. And perhaps that's why this story continues to endure. It exists at the intersection of certainty and uncertainty. We know the yacht sank. We know that people died. We know a storm struck. And beyond that, the details become increasingly difficult to pin down. Was the vessel fundamentally sound? Were earlier warnings significant? Could the tragedy have been prevented? Historians continue examining the evidence, and reasonable people could continue reaching completely different conclusions. The mystery survives because complete certainty never will arrive in this case. History happens in moments exactly like these, not always through presidents or wars or famous speeches, but through ordinary afternoons that suddenly become completely unforgettable for somebody. A family boards a yacht, and the weather changes. A vessel overturns, and lives are lost. The questions remain. More than a century later, we are still trying to understand not only what happened, but why it happened. And perhaps that's the question I want to leave for the comments today. When a tragedy leaves behind both evidence and uncertainty, what matters more? Finding a definitive explanation, or remembering the people whose lives were changed forever by the event, or the lives that were cut short by the event? The lives of the people like Etta Corrigan, Ida Mae Corrigan, Nettie Corrigan Riley, Jane Corrigan, and Ida Bell Corrigan. And of course, we can't forget the infant, Mary Riley. And make sure that if you do enjoy the deep dives into random, obscure, bizarre history like this, please make sure you follow the History Happens Facebook page for more deep dives into history's most fascinating moments, and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Every subscriber helps, and I do love hearing from you guys, so please sound off in the comments on Facebook or on YouTube. Thank you for watching.